This is the 15th session of the special FC meeting, and our time is from 11:25 to 12:55. Once again, we'd like to welcome the Secretary for Transport and Housing and his other colleagues for attending today's meeting. They'll be answering questions in relation to transport. Before members ask questions, I'll be giving some time to the Bureau Director to make an opening statement. Yes, over to you, Bureau Director. Yes, Chairman, I'd just like to briefly go over our priority areas under the transport portfolio in the new financial year regarding railway infrastructure, the construction works of the West Island Line, the South Island Line East, the Kwun Tong Line extension, the Sha Tin to Central Link, and the Hong Kong section of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen Hong Kong Express Rail Link are in progress. We expect them to be completed in phases between end 2014 and 2020. As for the long-term railway development of Hong Kong, we have commissioned a consultant to conduct a study for the review and update of the Railway Development Strategy 2000. The study has been completed. Having regard to the consultant's overall recommendations, we are formulating the blueprint for railway development beyond 2020 and will announce it later this year. Upon completion of the railway development strategy and having regard to the planning and progress of implementation of major transport infrastructure, we will conduct a study on the long-term development and layout of public transport modes in order to formulate our future strategy for public transport services. At the same time, we are pressing ahead with the implementation of large-scale local road projects, including the construction of, for instance, the Tuen Mun Chek Lap Kok Link, Central Wan Chai Bypass, and Island Eastern Corridor Link, as well as the widening of Tolo Highway and Fanling Highway. There are also projects under planning, such as the Central Kowloon Route, the Tseung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel, and the Tseung Kwan O Cross Bay Link. Besides, we are proceeding in full speed with the related local projects of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, including the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities and the Hong Kong Link Road projects, to tie in with the commissioning of the HZMB Main Bridge in 2016. Honourable Chairman, the government accords great importance to tackling the road congestion problem in Hong Kong. I've already invited the Transport Advisory Committee to conduct a study on the problem and recommend practicable short and medium-term improvement measures to the government before the end of this year. The government will also explore the possibility of the application of electronic road pricing in the Central District upon the commissioning of the Central Wan Chai Bypass. As regards the aviation sector, the government is actively assisting the Airport Authority in pressing ahead with the planning work for the 3-1 runway system at the Hong Kong International Airport. At present, the AA is finalizing the statutory environmental impact assessment report. Upon successful completion of the EIA process and other relevant statutory procedures, the construction works will commence as early as possible with a view to commissioning the 3RS in 2023. To enhance training for practitioners of the aviation industry in order to cope with the rapid growth of the civil aviation industry on a continuous basis, the Civil Aviation Department will commission a consultancy study to explore the feasibility of establishing a civil aviation training institute. In addition, the review on the framework for designation of Hong Kong Airlines has recently been completed, and the relevant industry players have been informed of the fine-tuned guidelines. In addition, the government has launched the $100 million Maritime and Aviation Training Fund. The fund will be used to sustain and enhance existing training schemes and scholarships, as well as to launch new initiatives with a view to building up a vibrant, diversified, and competitive pool of professionals and technical personnel to support the sustainable development of the maritime and aviation sectors in Hong Kong. In the meantime, the government is following up a consultancy recommendation on setting up a statutory maritime body to propel more comprehensive development of the maritime sector. Regarding the development of the port, the 2 consultancy studies, namely the preliminary feasibility study for the CT10 at Southwest Ching Yi and the study on the strategic development plan for Hong Kong Port 2030, or HKP 2030, are being finalized for completion. Based on the study results, we will comprehensively consider the long-term strategy and development plan for Hong Kong Port by taking into account the views of stakeholders and the global and local economic situation. We are also studying how to better allocate and manage some existing 100 hectares of port backup sites in Kwai Ching District in order to meet the development and operational needs of the port more effectively. On the logistics front, we are conducting a detailed traffic impact assessment in respect of the 10 hectares of land reserved for high-value value-added logistics used in Tuen Mun West. The results are expected to be available in the second half of this year. We will also carry out district consultation as soon as possible before making available the land in phases. As far as maritime safety or marine safety is concerned, the Marine Department has increased its manpower and resources for enhancing marine safety in local waters. As regards the proposed second phase improvement measures requiring relevant local vessels to install automatic identification or system or AIS and radar, the trade has been informed that the government will provide as appropriate subsidies to the ship owners for equipment installation as well as for crew members to attend training. We will strive to introduce relevant legislative proposals into the Legislative Council in the 2014-15 legislative year. I'll be pleased to answer members' questions with regard to policies. My secretaries, directors, and other colleagues would also be pleased to answer questions regarding operation and deployment of financial resources. Thank you. All right, thank you, Bureau Director. Let's move on to the 15th session, and we can now start our discussion. And the floor will now be open to members. As usual, we will give you 4 minutes in the first round, together including both questions and answers. Wong Kwok Heng, concerning para 2 of the opening statement by the Bureau Director with regard to railway development, what the Bureau Director just said precisely showed that the railway company is not a private company, is funded by the taxpayers, and then the administration should have been the major stakeholder. But then in terms of fares, well, supposedly there is a fare adjustment mechanism and fare will go up under the mechanism. So under these circumstances, I'd like to ask the administration this. Under the present mechanism, undeniably there are flaws. And it has nothing to do with the profit that has been made by the MTRCL. Last year they made $12 billion. And this year, should they look into this because of the huge profits? Should they not increase the fare? So can the administration consider this? Even under the FAM, can they consider not increasing their fare? That's point number 1. And number 2, concerning the rail operations, according to statistics, they have had a spate of incidents, and the incidence rate has been going up. And as we all know, it's very congested. And they are increasing fares every time, and yet the services have been coming down, and the standard is deteriorating. So I'd like to know, in terms of monitoring by the administration on the railway operations, the administration has not done its job. In particular, the MSD, whenever there are incidents involving the rail, they are always only informed afterwards. So what have you done? I'll strive to grasp the time. All right, with regard to the FAM, the fare adjustment mechanism, we have to look at the consumer price index and also the cost factor. And in 2007, we introduced this mechanism, and the administration already signed this operation agreement with the Railway Corporation. That is a statutory agreement. That's why whatever we do in terms of fare adjustment, we have to go by the agreed mechanism, and the mechanism should be reviewed once every 5 years under the agreement. We have done so once, and we have already given you the details. With regard to the mechanism, yes, we have already introduced this productivity factor, and it's been increased from 0.1 to 0.6. In other words, any time they want to raise fare, that cannot exceed the rise in terms of consumer prices and also in terms of the nominal wage index. We've also introduced this cap. That is for any year, if they want to increase or adjust the fare, that cannot go beyond the changes in the household income. And there are also other new factors in terms of the sharing of profits, and also if there are service delays by more than 31 minutes, then there will be different levels of penalty and fine. And in terms of fine and also the profit sharing and the amount of money that has been wired through such means, and they will also be offering this 10% discount on the second ride. So that is a comprehensive review. But then you haven't answered the question with regard to the substantial surplus. Can they decide not to increase the fare, or can that be plowed back to the passengers in the form of a rebate? Well, I've already said that the FAM is part of the operation agreement, and in 2007, the administration signed this agreement with the MTRCL. That's why we have to go by this mechanism, unless the two parties agree to renegotiate the agreement. That's another issue. All right, incident monitoring. Well, recently, in the light of some incidents, the administration attaches great importance to this. And Mr. Wong asked about the role played by the EMSD. If it's okay, then I'd like to defer to the director. Yes, concerning safety of railway, the EMSD has spared no effort in doing our job. If you look at the number of incidents from 2001, we had some 800 plus, and it came down to about 670 in 2013. And in terms of incidents happening in premises of the MTRCL, that also came down from 1,900 in 2011 and 12 to about 1,500 last year. Mr. Chen Kem-lam. Thank you, Chairman. Well, my observation is that in terms of our transport network, there are two saturation points. One, at the railway trunk network is already saturated. So to resolve this problem, we may have to wait till the commissioning of the SCL and some of its spur lines in a few years' time, and then we'll be able to resolve this problem and ease the phenomenon. But then, in the short term, I hope that the administration can deploy some resources and consider this. For example, at present there are some stations whereby the passengers are extremely congested. Very often they will have to wait for 3 or 4 trains before they can board a train. So can we do something about it in order to ease the congestion? Another saturation point is our road-based transport network. Well, in the past, we have always found that a big headache. Well, the administration has also announced recently that there would not be this diversion plan of the crossover tunnels. But then we'll have to wait for a couple of years before something can be done about it. And we also talk about the CKR, the Central Kowloon route. Well, we're still discussing that. So will the administration be increasing more resources and manpower to expedite some of these so-called planning processes so that we can resolve these problems as soon as possible, so that the present flow might exacerbate and the problem might get more serious. So my question is, will the administration consider increasing resources, both in terms of manpower and financial resources, in order to ease the two saturation points that I referred to just now? With regard to some road projects, I'll defer to the Highways Department to give you the details. With regard to the railway operation, in the wake of community concerns, both in terms of incidence rate and also the congestion on platform and also on board of the train, we have been liaising closely with the railway corporations. As you are aware, towards the end of March, they also announced a number of measures in terms of the frequency. Well, they're going to increase about 300 trains every week, and also on the platform, they're going to deploy 300 more platform staff to control the order, so that passengers will find it easier to board the trains. And sometimes when people board the train, because the doors keep closing and opening time and again, that might cause some delays. That's why we are also going to do something about in order to reduce that. So there would be some guides to assist people in boarding the trains. And also in terms of the frequency of trains, that would also be affected and constrained by the signaling system. And if they go beyond that, then that might also cause some safety concerns. That's why we cannot go too far. But then the Transport Department will be monitoring the service of the Railway Corporation. We have already informed the MTRCL. We'll be stepping up our monitoring of its work. And also in terms of safety, as the Director just said, well, safety is something that we attach a great importance to. Yes. On the road projects, Director. Yes, the Highways Department understands that the public do expect us to press ahead with our road projects as soon as possible. That's why we are pressing ahead with all the projects full steam. And given the constraint in resources, we have already tried our best. For example, outsourcing some of our work to consultancy firms in order to compress the timetable in pressing ahead with the project. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Ronnie Tong. Let's follow up on two questions. 13134 and the other one 3188. And I'm talking about 008 and 112. The first question is the CAD will be increasing its budget by over 20% in the coming year. We asked why. The administration said because there would be reorganization. But this is strange. With reorganization, there should be an increase in efficiency. Why do you need a bigger budget? And then you also say that you'll continue to monitor the demand for helicopter services and development. I'd like to ask the Bureau Chief, what is the demand for heliport services now? How many helicopter services, how much is that for the entire year? And that is why do you want to increase the monitoring? And secondly, I'd like to ask about the third runway. We understand that even according to the present plan, the third runway will only be available only in 2033, but you don't even start to resolve your financial problems. I asked in my question what we can do in the interim so as to respond to the increasing demand. And you said that you will have another passenger terminal building and you are going to increase the parking stands by 20. Now, I'd like to know whether these measures can really take care of our aviation growth until 2033. Bureau Director, maybe the first question should be answered by the Director of Civil Aviation. And secondly, about the third runway, we are not talking about 2033. Our target is actually 2023. The AA has already finished its EIA, which will be submitted to the EPD shortly. There is a statutory process to go through. We hope the EIA process can be completed within the year so that we can start detailed design, etc. Now, what I mean is by increasing the parking stands and also by having another passenger terminal building, can we take care of increasing demand until the completion of the third runway? Can you answer that question? Chairman, we said in the open in the past that in the coming few years, the airport will be nearing its saturation in terms of capacity. The CAD is doing its best so that we can have more landings and takeoffs as much as possible within safety limits. As Mr. Tong has said in our oral or written reply, we are going to provide 20 additional aircraft parking stands, and we are also going to add to our midfield capacity. But with regard to the third runway construction, indeed, we have to go through a process, and also reclamation will be involved. And in fact, it can almost amount to building a new airport. Therefore, the year 2023 is our target year. Still, you are not answering my question. My question is whether you can cope with demand. You are taking measures, but is that going to meet the growing demand until the completion or before the completion of the third runway? Chairman, I think I have already answered my question. I have already said that in the coming few years, the airport capacity will be nearing its saturation point. What about the helicopter services? Director of Civil Aviation. Let me add, because the International Aviation Organization has issued Schedule 19 recently, saying that the air aviation units throughout the world will have to do more by way of air safety. That is why the CAD is starting to reorganize. In a certain division, we are going to add resources, and then other divisions will have a cut in resources. In the reorganization process, the CAD is not asking for more resources at all. What about helicopter services? We need to monitor the demand for helicopter services in Hong Kong and Macau, but not only that, we also have to be careful about future developments? Say, for example, would there be demand for helicopter services between Hong Kong and other places, that is across the boundary? Next one, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. In his opening remarks, the Secretary mentioned road congestion. It is said that you are going to consider ERP. But I think there is a more pressing issue, and that is within these 10 years, there has been a rapid growth of private cars. Actually, we have almost 520,000 private cars in the register. So could I ask you whether you would make reference to previous measures in order to control the growth of private cars annually? Say, for example, it used to be 3%, but in the last few years, it might have reached 4% or 5%. I think you are not controlling the growth of private cars anymore, and we believe that might be a major contributor to road congestion, especially on busy roads. Secondly, a point closer to my heart. We have seen reports, and actually the Secretary has answered this question, the so-called electronic bicycles. Since it is not regulated by any laws now, so there will not be any licenses by the TD for them to be on our roads. But then there are electric motors, and therefore they should not be used on cycle tracks at all. So electric bicycles, of course, are akin to a smoke-free city and also low-carbon living. However, it is neither here nor there given our regulatory regime. Secretary, will you instruct the TD to face the problem squarely and look at an effective regulatory regime for electric bicycles so that they can be used on our roads? Chairman, with regard to electric bicycles, I think some views have been referred to the LegCo, by the LegCo to the administration. I think the TD is looking into the issue. I think we are looking at the relevant issues, and also the growth in private cars is indeed a problem. In the last few years, indeed, the biggest growth has been seen in the number of private cars. We can only do two things, indeed, to control the number of private cars. One, by financial means, by having more taxes or levies. Secondly, like other cities, we may need to stipulate even numbers can use the cars on a certain day, and car plates with an odd number can be used on other days, etc. But this is about how cars can use the roads. But then people also say, if there are more cars, why don't you build more roads? Why don't you also provide more park and ride services? But then that again might lead to a bigger number of private cars. So we have to look at both supply and demand. We hope that the road congestion study now undertaken by the Traffic Advisory Committee can help us solve the problem. But then the Secretary has not answered my question. Previously, the TD would like to cap the growth of private cars annually at 3%, but you are not applying that indicator anymore. Have you abandoned that indicator? No, actually. If the growth rate is way above 3%, that must be a warning. So we are also very concerned about congestion on our roads. So it is not a control measure, it is just a warning. I think the TD would like to speak on motorbikes. Commissioner, indeed, under our regulatory regime now, motorbikes cannot be given any category. It is not a motorcycle. And motorbike is a new category, a new product. So we are looking at our regulatory regime to see how we can accommodate motorbikes. We have an open mind. Do you have a timetable? Chairman, we do not have a specific timetable, but we will do it ASAP because we know the product is already in the market. Next one, Dr. Priscilla Leung. Chairman, the Kwun Tong extension and also SCL are being constructed. I'd like to follow up on question 170 and 176. As you know, when we have railway projects, there will be also roadworks. And again, such roadworks will cause congestion. And also, indeed, there are many tourists in Hong Kong, and therefore we have more congestion. When the ferry service between Hong Kong and Central was cancelled on the 31st of March 2011, we already forewarned that this would happen. Actually, ferries can take care of a lot of passengers, especially in Huang Pao, in Hong Kong. There are a lot of railway projects going on now. I believe you should have preserved that ferry service, but it was said that fuel charges were high, maintenance fees were also high, and so no one could afford the service. And today, the ferry service between North Point and Hong Kong was such that the fares went up by 22% in 2011, and now the fares have gone up to $6.50. I know it is because of their expenses. We have met the ferry company many times, and we have also reflected the views to TD and THB.
So, Hong Kong to Central and Wan Chai, in response, you said that in 2010 you tendered that out, but then back then, the Hong Kong waterfront or waterfront promenade was not yet commissioned, and the bureau director also went there in September 2011. When you went there, you were very impressed.
So would you think of other policies so as to support ferry services so that there would not be the continuous increase in fares and so that the ferry services can be preserved? For example, whether you can allow them to take out advertisements, and also why don't you develop the waterfront so that it will be more vibrant? And also in terms of tourism, why don't you bring more tourists to these areas so they have other operations? Advertisements are a big source of income, and they might be able to complement the operation of ferries instead of charging higher fares of customers. And also in the last session of the transport panel in LegCo and also the Kowloon City District Council agreed that the ferry policy should be reviewed. Now you only give subsidy to outlying island routes, but then within the urban area it is very environmental, and actually Hong Kong people love to take a ferry in the harbour. Why don't you give concessions? Why don't you have monthly passes, yearly passes? And even if group tours want to make use of ferries, why don't you subsidize them? And also, after having the cruise terminal in Kai Tak, we said that perhaps ferries can go along the coast so that they are like tourism measures, so that ferries can be kept. Sorry, Chairman, I don't have a lot of time, so let me give a brief reply. With regard to ferry policies, as I said at transport panel meetings, outlying islands rely on ferries alone to leave the islands. So the 6 outlying island routes must be preserved, and therefore there is a special kind of assistance given to them, including pier fares, insurance, and other fare fees. Those are waived. And also, we also help them to have non-fare revenue. Say, for example, in the central piers from number 4 to number 6, we are trying to see how we can add another story to it so it can generate more income. But in fact, the administration wouldn't like to make use of public money to subsidize such services lightly. All routes must be proven to be financially viable before they can be operated. And if we also have cross-harbour railways and buses, people do not necessarily have to use ferries to cross the harbour. And ferries use our fairways as well, and we have to understand that fairways are very busy, and we have to consider about safety. I hope the Bureau Secretary will not be bureaucratic. I think he understands you. Ms. Emily Lau, Deputy Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I hope the Secretary will really give a hand to Hong Kong people. We are talking about the quality of life. Yesterday, Mr. Greg So was here. He was asking people to wait for 1 or a few more trains to board the MTR. He said that we should balance the issues and help to create job opportunities. Job opportunities, of course, have to be created, but you might have taken the MTR, I don't know, but people are crying out foul because people have to wait for many trains before they can board, and even if they are on the trains, it's so crowded people can hardly breathe. So in this financial year, Secretary, I'd like to ask you what resources, what strategies you have in order to make life easier for the general public. You can add train trips, you can have longer trains, you can have more bus routes in order to stream passengers so that when people go to work, when people go out, they can have transportation. You know, in the past, people take the MTR, but now they have to crowd into an MTR. You have to listen to this. This is unanimous in the LegCo across the entire political spectrum. It's not just your bureau, but Greg So's bureau and other bureaus have to think about this. Is it that we have too many people coming into Hong Kong from outside so that our transportation is crowded? Why is it that when people come to Hong Kong, they are given concessions on our transportation? When we go outside Hong Kong, tourists do not have concessions on other people's transportation. Is it that you think our trains are not crowded enough?
So why can't you think about it? So what's your view about this? Well, whatever transport they take is really very congested. So can your bureau do something for them? Well, during the past few months, whether it's in the community or in this council's transport panel, yes, I understand that there have been very strong views expressed, and we have talked to the MTRCL to see what can be done to improve the situation. In my answer to an earlier question, I already said that in terms of the signaling system, wherever possible, we're trying to increase the number of trains and the frequency so that as far as the Island Line is concerned, we hope that we'll be able to achieve a frequency rate of about 6 minutes per for a train. And also in terms of the train 2 minutes a train. And also, before the enhancement of the signaling system, it might not be feasible for us to increase the number of trains. But then the Transport Department is now considering that during busy peak hours, we can have new bus routes in order to ease the congestion. That's being studied. And the MTRCL is also studying the possibility that during the morning rush hours, can we offer some early bird concessions so that in terms of the passenger flow, we can also have better triage or diversion. But then what about Hong Kong residents? Should we offer, well, I mean for non-Hong Kong residents, should we be offering concessions because it's already very congested? Well, Taiwan is now considering imposing a cap on the number of visitors. So why can't you do something to help the Hong Kong public? Because many Hong Kong passengers are finding it very difficult. They don't even have a breathing space. Well, when you refer to non-Hong Kong resident concessions, what are you referring to? Well, for people coming across the boundary and taking the train. Well, my understanding may not be entirely correct because we are checking this up with the MTRCL. We are talking about some time-limited concessions offered by Shenzhen, and of course we can relay members' concerns to the MTRCL. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm the chairman of the Railway Subcommittee, and we are looking forward to the administration's proposals with regard to the railway development strategy after 2020. So that's supposed to be in May or June, and we do look forward to that because with the commissioning of the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, and also many bridges are being built, and also whether we should keep the light rail system and so on. Many of these issues have not been dealt with in the past, and as far as the CY Leung government and Mr. Anthony Cheung are concerned, I do agree that you have a commitment for the long term. I hope that you will not be dragging your feet again. But then before 2018, something will happen. According to the government's projections with regard to the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, that will bring in about 65,000 passenger trips, and then for XRL, it will bring in about 100,000 passenger trips, and a total of 160 passenger trips will be brought in by these two projects. So if somebody wants to cross the harbor, well, definitely he will have to do so, because after you've come to Hong Kong, if you've never been to Causeway Bay, then you've never been to Hong Kong at all. So with the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, the people will be taking the Tung Chung line, and then for the others, they'll be taking the Tung Chung line. And according to the administration, during peak hours, the utilization rate is already up to 84%, so the spare capacity is only 16%. So has the administration conducted any assessment on whether or not the spare capacity of 16% will be able to take on the 160,000 people who will have to cross the harbor using the rail service? Bureau Director, well, as far as the administration is concerned, of course, we have to monitor the situation closely in terms of the changes in the passenger flow. Yes, the railway system has become more busy in recent years, and you also refer to some new infrastructure projects, including the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge and also the XRL project. Yes, it's not just non-local residents will be using them, local people would also be using them, and therefore, in terms of the new patronage, we will have to conduct further assessment. But then Mr. Michael Tien also said that we're going to issue the RDS 2020. Indeed, that's going to be a very important blueprint for our future. And as I said in my opening statement, we have already completed the consultancy study, and we are now coming up with the specific blueprint, and we hope to be able to release that later. Sorry, I was asking about the short-term issue. I'm most concerned about the 165,000 people who will be coming in 2016, and they'll have to cross the harbor. We don't know how many of them will actually be doing so. Have you done any assessment? And also, when they take the Tung Chung line, will there be spare capacity for them? So how will it be able to cope? Will there be more through bus service so that they can take a bus and cross the harbor? I defer to my colleague. Yes, as Mr. Tien just pointed out, well, during busy hours, Tung Chung's utilization rate is about 85%, 84%. So it's very high already. But then according to our understanding with the MTRCL, well, under the current signaling system, there is still room for them to increase the number of trains. How much? So we're talking about 165,000 people per day. So have you done any calculation? Well, as the Bureau Director just said, in the future, we'll be working with the MTRCL. We will continue to make assessment, and there is still room for further enhancement. You will also have to conduct a stress test. Next, Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Reply number 172 is about driving tests and the average waiting time. Yes, in your reply, the figure is quite astonishing, because from 2009 to 2013, it doubled, and apparently it's going to go up further. And in your reply, you also said that you'll be recruiting more driving examiner. I don't know how many people have applied and what's the success rate. So my question is, what measures will be put in place to resolve this recruitment problem? And also, some people tell us that in the US, the waiting time is 2 weeks, and then in Singapore is somewhat longer, but then still is a lot shorter than us. So in terms of the recruitment difficulties, are there any plans to improve that? And of course, you also talk about an early appointment system, but then how is it going to work? And also 113 is about railway project safety. Well, for the West Rail, in particular, the Island West and the XRL, in terms of the accident rate, is quite high, and there were 4 fatalities. So, given the fact that you are the bureau responsible for the construction work, so what's the role to be played by the THB, and what measures are in place to avoid further incidents like that from happening? And also in your reply, with regard to the XRL Hong Kong section, there are also some unsettled claims, and a total of 78 have not been resolved. What are the reasons? So in dealing with such claims, how long would it take in the past? Bureau Director, I'll defer to the Commissioner for Transport and also the Director for Highways to answer the questions. Chairman, I'll try to answer Mr. Poon's question about driving test. Yes, it's correct that in terms of recruiting driving examiners, we have encountered some difficulties because for the driving examiners, we do have high requirement in terms of their ability, and we're not going to compromise on that because their role is very important because for people passing the examination, they'll be driving on the roads, and that would also have an impact on road safety, and therefore the driving examiners themselves will have to be very skilled in driving, and they are not just required to drive one type of vehicle. They have to be conversant in different vehicles, and also under stressful situations, will they be able to explain to the candidate as to what their problems are, and when they are challenged, what they are supposed to do, and whether or not they are calm on the spot, and also within a very short space of time, will they be able to make decisions and so on. So these are very important factors to be considered. That's why it's not easy to recruit people, but then we will continue with the effort. Another thing that would add to the difficulty of conducting driving tests because we have limited number of driving examination centers because we do have such examination centers at different locations. But then when we try to increase the number of examination centers, very often we would meet with opposition because for the learner drivers, they will try to use routes nearby the examination centers to practice, and that would also add to some road congestion. That's why there would sometimes be objection from the local residents. And also, we have to make better use of our listing mechanism. We have also introduced some computer programs to enable repeaters to take the examination easier. So that's the repeater early test appointment booking service. And also, we also have to conduct driving tests for franchise bus captains, and once we are able to resolve that problem, then some of the driving examiners can also be redeployed to conduct more road tests. Yes, with regard to worksite safety, the administration attaches a lot of importance to that, and under the Development Bureau, we have already introduced a series of measures, including the pre-qualification of contractors, their experience. We have also launched a number of publicity campaigns in order to promote road safety. Yes, we have engaged the MTRCL to carry out the actual works for the construction of rail lines, but then they will also have to follow our guidelines in terms of safety. And also, Mr. Poon also asked about claims. In fact, under the relevant ordinance, if the railway projects have caused any loss on the part of the public, for example, business loss, they will be allowed to make claims, and therefore some of these cases are still being negotiated. Next, Chen Yunhan. She is not in the room. Next, Dr. K.K. Kwok. Chairman, I have 3 questions for the administration. One, about the fare structure of the MTRCL. All right, as the Bureau Director for Housing, well, for a city suitable for a livable environment, actually transport is very important. Worldwide, for example, Shanghai, Beijing, and so on, well, they've never pegged the railway fare with the actual mileage. But then, in the case of the MTRCL, you've allowed the market to take the decision. But then for people living in remote districts, for example, in Jinshui and also NT Northwest and Tongchong, yes, in terms of their affordability, some of them are in the lower rung of society, and therefore their affordability is the lowest. But then in terms of mileage is the highest, and therefore they will have to pay more. And therefore we have often asked the administration to revamp the fare structure so that a better balance can be struck. So do you have any plans to do that within this year, or when are you going to do that? Because that will also have to do with how you're able to encourage more people to go to live in new towns, and also in Ma Wan and also Discovery Bay, they are still subject to some unequal terms. For example, the developers have been given the right to monopolize all transport modes in those areas, and there have been calls for the administration to increase the opening up so that there can be more competition, and then residents will file fewer complaints, and there would also be more choices on the part of the passengers. So has the administration got plans to resolve this problem of unequal treaty? And also, I understand that you're going to conduct a review on our railway network, but then in recent years, for some of the major infrastructure projects and also for some of the sections that have not been fully utilized, for example, the at some of the cross-border crossing points, well, you've spent a lot of money, but then in terms of the cost effectiveness is quite below what the administration had expected. So will you be reviewing that in terms of cost effectiveness, and also for the next cycle of major infrastructure projects, will you be redesigning the facilities?
First of all, on cost effectiveness, we place a lot of emphasis on it. We understand that the LegCo is very concerned about the increase in budget for a lot of big infrastructural projects. I understand members are very concerned about supplementary provisions sought. So we'll take a look. However, coming to infrastructure investment, we cannot just look at the financial outlay or the cost effectiveness, because traditionally when we talk about the economy, we may be talking about effectiveness in terms of the saving of time. However, some effectiveness may be in terms of the benefit for society, for health, or for the environment. And if with a kind of transport infrastructure we can have a better community in a certain area, then that will also go towards the counting of cost. As to whether there is monopoly, I have always said that our transport policy is that we use railway as the trunk, but then we are not allowing it to have a monopolizing position. We are now still balancing the railway against other modes of transport. So later on, when we release the railway development blueprint, I will say again that we will not deprive the public of choice. However, unavoidably, when new railways are built, there will certainly be some impact on other modes of transport, whether it be franchised buses or GMBs or taxis. And also, if we invest so much on railways, we have to make sure that there will be enough patronage. And I believe there will be the flow of passengers towards the railways as a result. But as I said, after the release of the Railway Development Blueprint, we will then take a comprehensive look at our future public transport development. We will also look at the strategy for future development. Then we will be able to take a look at the positioning of different modes of transport, including Mr. Michael Teen's concern towards the LRT. As to the fare structure of the MTRCL, indeed, it uses the mileage traveled as the basis, but we have successfully introduced monthly passes, including that for Tung Chung residents, and also even if you interchange between lines, you will also have enhanced concessions so that people who live in remote areas do not have to be under so much burden in terms of transport fares. But then, will there be a change in the fare structure in the coming year? The monthly pass system is such that you have to take 25 trips from Tung Chung to the central area before you can benefit. Chairman, talking about an overall review of fare structure, that will be done once every 5 years. But then we can do it at any time if there is a strong request from either party. But as you know, the MTRCL also reviews its concession plans from time to time, and if necessary, there can be improvements. Next one, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. I'd like to follow up on what Ms. Emily Lau asked, and that is crowdedness on MTR. I understand that there will be difficulty to boost the passenger capacity overnight, but I hope you can do something in the interim. Other departments are working on rationalization of bus routes. Now, but once when we talk about rationalization, it always means a cutting of routes or a reduction in frequency, and that would just amount to fewer choices for passengers. Rather, I would think that when the MTR cannot cope with passenger demand, I think it is time for you to do more with buses. The TD exerted pressure on bus companies in order to ask them to reduce frequency and reduce routes. However, I think you should allow them to do more instead of less now. I can see that the TD should play a more active role in encouraging bus companies to provide bus routes that are in high demand. In fact, news reports are talking about point-to-point service. I think in the past, you used to have this policy on reducing direct competition with the railway. But I don't think that policy applies anymore. Secretary, can you comment on this? Chairman, first, I'd like to say that perhaps Mr. Sin has talked about two different concepts. One, rationalization of bus routes. It is not just about reduction of frequency or the cutting of routes. Now, of course, if the public have strong views about certain proposals, then we'll look into them. But the principle is, if the passenger load is low, we act by certain standards, then we have to consider cutting the routes or merging routes or reducing frequency on certain routes. But we still have to make sure that external transport for a certain district is still a matter of choice for passengers. When new railways are completed, it is unavoidable that there will be an impact on other modes of transport. If the fares of the railway go down even more, then there will be even more pressure on other modes of transport. Again, we have to balance the fares. No matter what, we have to preserve choices for passengers. As for peak hours, the MTR is not meeting passenger demand. As I said just now, the TD is talking to the MTRCL and also bus companies so that during peak hours, bus services can also be provided. But then, this has nothing to do with the rationalization of bus routes. Because if we want to reduce frequency or cut certain bus routes, we are only targeting the routes with a low passenger demand. No, the question is, once you talk about rationalization of bus routes, it's always about the reduction of frequency or the cutting of routes. But can you redeploy buses from low-demand routes in order to serve passengers who cannot board the MTR? I can't see any concrete plans in this regard in order to tackle crowdedness on MTR. Well, actually, this is exactly what we are doing. After rationalization of bus routes, if there are buses which are no longer needed, then I believe they can be deployed on new services. Maybe I can ask the Commissioner to comment. Yes, Chairman, the Secretary is exactly correct. That is what we are doing. In the North District, we are reducing frequency on low-demand routes, or actually some routes are cut. And of course, there are no direct bus services from the North District to Hong Kong Island East, and we have opened a new route for that purpose, and also another one from North District to Sham Shui Po. In fact, railways serve these districts as well. However, since there is saturation already on the railway, we have opened or created those bus routes. We are going to do the same in other districts. However, we must not lose sight of something, and if there is too much point-to-point service, then maybe after crossing the harbour tunnel or even before so, the buses would be packed on the road surface. So maybe we should also think about interchange services instead of having a dedicated bus route from every estate in a new town to Central Wan Chai or Causeway Bay. We have to consider all these in our overall planning. But what the member suggested is already being done. Next one, Mr. Paul Chair. Chairman, in para 9 and 11 of the opening remarks, you say you have to look at the future direction of our port and also increase resources for the Marine Department and also marine safety. I welcome all that. We have to also make the best use of the harbour, since we have such a beautiful harbour. However, we have somehow neglected the harbour all along. Now that we have the cruise terminal, I have already said that if you can't link the cruise terminal to Kowloon East, there will be a disaster. Now, between Kwun Tong and Sa Wan Ho and Kwun Tong and North Point, there are existing ferry services. If you can just adjust the ferry routes a little so that they are berthed near the typhoon shelter at the cruise terminal, then you will be able to actually provide a link or feeder. Will you consider doing that? In other words, you increase the connectivity of the cruise terminal to the land. Secondly, I'd like to refer to question 022. I understand that in Tsewan Shan and Yut Hwa Street, you have these pedestrian links being built. And then in Chok Yuen North, you are studying the situation as well. In order to tackle traffic congestion, you should take reference from the mid-levels escalator. People don't have to take transport to go up to the mid-levels. They are using the escalator. And in fact, it has brought vibrancy to the areas around the escalator or hillside escalator links. In order to take care of pedestrian demand and also talking about the Anderson Hill construction, perhaps you can consider providing more hillside escalator links from Tsewan Shan and Kwun Tong in order to go up the hills. I think the Secretary can answer this. And number 3, there have been a lot of comments saying that consultants rule Hong Kong. But if I may refer to the information, in terms of traffic and transport, we have used $7 million on a consultancy study to stream traffic among the 3 cross-harbor tunnels. And also, you say you need to go for the Massachusetts Polytechnic and also Stanford University in order to tackle MTR congestion. Is it that Hong Kong do not have the talents? Why do you have to go to MIT and Stanford University in order to tackle the situation? We have spent so much public money on the big civil service team, and there must be a lot of professionals within the team. Can you give some time for the Secretary to answer you? With regard to the cruise terminal connectivity issue, I'll defer to the Commissioner. As for the hillside escalator links, there are project matters, and the relevant director can answer it. Whether Hong Kong is ruled by consultants, I don't think so. Governments around the world engage consultants to do studies. And if you say the civil service team should have all the professions and talents, then we might to have a very bloated team. I agree. Consultants do not necessarily have to come from overseas. Local professionals also serve as consultants in certain projects. Mr. Chair talked about concession plans by the MTR, which is engaging outside consultants. I won't comment on that because it makes its own judgment. But local academics do cooperate with local ventures. Chairman, can the Commissioner please reply the question? Chairman, can I answer the question on the cruise terminal? Whether cruise passengers can take a ferry to go to other places in Hong Kong, not necessarily ferries, but vessels. That depends a lot on the arrangements made by the cruise terminal. If this is required, we can consider it. But I believe the cruise terminal operator and cruise companies will look at where the passengers would like to go before they make that requirement. Sometimes they might prefer to take a ferry, but if their destination is the Kowloon Peninsula, then it might not be necessary for them to use a ferry, but we are open to all suggestions. We have 4 more members in the first round. I have to control the time. We have to complete all the questions before we end. Next, Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on question 135. I'm talking about the reservation of 10 hectares of land in Tuen Mun. You said that after the TIA, it might take you to the end of 2015, but now you have shortened it to end 2014. And hopefully you can release the land in phases from 2015. I thank you for increasing your pace of work. on behalf of the sector. I understand you're also looking into land in Kwai Ching and how there could be redeployment, because as you know, there is insufficient land at the container terminal. Yesterday, talking about planning and lands, we came to understand that there could be a car park built for heavy vehicles, including articulated vehicles. Of course, you will look at financial viability. Yesterday, Mr. Paul Chan said that it would be related to you, but since you are here today, I will say this to you direct. When you think about financial viability, you must not lose sight of the new land released and the overall social impact coming from it. You should not just look at construction cost and whether the rental charged will be able to cover cost. I hope you will look into that. And then question 139. This is related. You are looking into land use in Kwai Ching. I have received some complaints from my sector just now. Some STT sites are making life difficult for the sector because they cannot plan for long-term investment. Some STT sites are to expire and the rental or hiring fee is going up by 20–30%. I don't understand it. I asked the director of lands yesterday and that he would talk to the bureau, he said.
As you can see in our neighboring countries, they do have plans to support the development of certain industries. And then in the logistics sector in Hong Kong, apparently there aren't that many policies to support them. And then for the STT, well, they are adjusting the rents in accordance with the latest transactions. And if you look at the international market situation, and I think the sector is now in great difficulty. So what are you going to do to help them? 198. The Bureau says that in Lantau and Tung Chung, in terms of bus services and so on, everything is going well. But then according to the sector, well, whether it's the Asia Expo or the airport, the connection is not good. So in the reply, you have this footnote saying that where necessary, you would also be introducing more GMB services. Well, I'm very grateful to that because this is new thinking. So can you allow more time for the Bureau Director to answer your questions? Yes, thank you, Mr. Yik, for your suggestion. We will be pragmatic in looking at the needs of the sector so that we can come up with the best possible solution. Yes, indeed, in considering the cost effectiveness and in terms of the support for our industries, we should not just be looking at the revenue aspect. We should also be looking at a basket of factors. With regard to Kwai Ching's backup sites and how that can be enhanced, I'll defer to my colleague, Ms. Chen, to answer the question. Yes? Director? Which one is to answer the question? Concerning the review is underway. We also understand that there was some concern expressed about the rate of increase in terms of the STT rental. According to our current policy, there will be a review once every 3 years in the light of the prevailing market rate. I understand that there are some concerns in the sector, and therefore, in our upcoming review, we will also be looking at how that could be dealt with in the best possible manner. So that's to be dealt with. With regard to the rent increase for the sites in question, the Lands Department will be looking at the justifications put forth by the sector and also their operation circumstances in determining that there is an appeal mechanism and an appeal is being dealt with. Next, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, reply number 058. And this question is about the RDS and also land resumption. Well, in 2012, 2.53, but then in 2013, only 0.01 hectares. I understand why, because that's precisely because some of the railway projects are now underway in tandem. That's why they are towards the end of their construction. That's why you don't need to resume any further land. Well, for the railway development strategy, all right, the blueprint will be released later. But then are we going to repeat history again so that for some of these projects you are going to carry them out in tandem again? Well, even if a decision is taken today, there is already this gap, because we understand that there is a very long lead time for planning some of these railway projects, from the time to plan and also to the final testing and so on. All right, we do want to have very good interface between different projects so that our resources, both including manpower, can be deployed more effectively. So as far as the sector is concerned, we have been urging the administration to make an early decision. Well, for those absolutely essential projects, for example, the island lines and also the northern links and so on, we do not see any reason why we cannot press ahead with these projects. But then in terms of the time arrangement, it's really very problematic. So my question for the Bureau Director is, before the start or commencement of these projects, there should also be very good interface so that the resources can be deployed most effectively. Because other than these cross-district lines, there are also smaller district-based railway improvement projects, because many districts would like them to be implemented as soon as possible and would be prepared to support them. Thank you. Bureau Director, yes, Dr. Loh was right. In terms of resource deployment, whether it's manpower or the resources from the sector and even our financial cash flow and expenses and so on, there should be a reasonable streaming. But then sometimes there are some specific hardship, or what are the challenges? Well, as far as railway projects are concerned, of course we have not released the results yet. But then for any project, well, the local residents would like them to be implemented as soon as possible. So in terms of time scheduling, we have to be scientific while we can also feel the local sentiments. Yes, we will be paying attention to this, and we try to make sure that the scheduling will be done in a better manner. Well, Chairman, let me put it this way. I'm not trying to say that, well, we should delay the projects. Well, I'm just telling you that's the crux of the problem. Indeed, for the strategic blueprint is already delayed, and therefore, yes, you are pressing ahead with many projects, but then there might be a gap in between. So it's a question of bunching. So, Bureau Director, I am sympathetic with you. Sometimes there are political reasons. For example, for the XRL, it should not have been delayed so long. So I would also like to call upon my colleagues to be more objective in making the assessment. Well, for things that need to be done, well, if there are delays to some of these projects, then that would also be that would also not be good for the railway development. And if some of these projects can go ahead earlier, then we do not have to experience so much congestion today. Yes, you're trying to reduce economic activity so that the trains will be less congested. I don't think that's good. On the contrary, we should press ahead with some of these projects in order to ease congestion. Next, Chen Yunhan. Thank you, Chairman. All right. I just ran into some people, and then I told them that I had to rush to this meeting. Well, they told me that you would have to tell them that, well, fares are extremely high, and therefore you will have to convey this to them. Yes, in Hong Kong, we do support this green idea. That's why we are using railway service as the backbone of our service. But then, apparently, there is this monopoly. That's why I try to look at what happened in the past. Well, the administration is the major shareholder of the Railway Corporation, and if you look at the shareholding, actually we hold more than 70% of the shares of the Railway Corporation, and the Bureau Director and some of our senior officials are sitting on their board of directors. Yes, you have this fare adjustment mechanism, which will require them to take into account a number of factors, but then they are making huge profits, and there are also other forms of revenue, for example, superstructure development and so on. Yes, you said that you respect the FAM, the fare adjustment mechanism, and there are also other factors to be taken into account, including productivity. But then, well, in Beijing, it's very inexpensive if you take public transport. Well, it will cost you about $2 if you take a bus. So livelihood, people's livelihood is a very important consideration. All right, we hold major shares in the shareholding of the company, and we also enacted the law, and we also insisted that the administration should continue to keep this major shareholding. But then the fact is they are increasing fares incessantly. So you should not just be talking about the three overriding factors. In fact, there have been an outcry. There are a lot of complaints out there. All right, yesterday a political group also said that, well, transport has been a major problem. And in your opening statement, in para 2, you also talk about railway infrastructure project. Well, using that as a backbone of our transport system, I support that. But then there is a public outcry on this, and people have to take the train day in, day out. So what happens? Well, in fact, we also have other complaints about other forms of transport. What's your question then? Well, as the major shareholder of the railway corporation, what are you going to do, government? So, noting that they are increasing fare every year, and they have also got such a huge reserve, why can't that be plowed back so that fares do not have to go up that sharply? Because you're a major shareholder, why can't you make that decision? Well, Bureau Director, last year, when we refined the fare adjustment mechanism, we already explained that openly. Well, in terms of the railway operations, well, at the time when we negotiated the fare adjustment mechanism with the railway corporation, in fact, we were talking to them as the administration, and we negotiated with them on that basis. We are not talking to them as a major shareholder. We cannot just say that major shareholders' interests should prevail over those of the minor shareholders, because the MTRCL is a listed company. Even though the administration is a major shareholder, we cannot overrule the minority shareholders. But then in terms of a public transport policy and objective, we have to ensure that it's in public interest, because the MTRCL, if you look at the history of its establishment, is a public body, and therefore I've been emphasizing that point time and again. In terms of cross-subsidy of fares, of course, in Beijing and Shanghai, there is huge cross-subsidy. That's why they are charging only $2. But then as a result of that, they're also experiencing a lot of operational difficulties. But then in Hong Kong, we do have this public transport policy, and we have been saying that we're not going to subsidize the railway, and our tax base is also very narrow, and if we try to subsidize the railway operations, and in terms of other welfare services and so on, they might also be affected. But then what are they going to use the profit for? So it's not going to be given to the FS. You have already stated your point, and he has given his reply. All right, you're owning some 76.65% of its shares. I don't think you are not in a position to deal with that, even though you have to respect the interests of the minor shareholders. Well, Chairman, I also have to supplement what we try as far as possible not to affect the relationship between the major and minority shareholders. We have already tried our best. Next, Raymond Chan. Thank you, Chairman. This morning, many colleagues have asked about the congestion in our railway system, and obviously the administration's reply is not satisfactory. Well, my reply number is 142. So in Admiralty Station, is almost a disaster in terms of congestion. So it's not just about crossing the harbor. If you go down at 6 o'clock, even if you just travel on the Island Line going east, is very congested. And in your reply, you said that the signaling system will be enhanced, because if you look at the frequency, well, you are already doing your best. And I understand that the MTRCL has spent billions of dollars in order to enhance that, but then in terms of frequency, that could only go up by 10%, and it can only be done in 2018. So this water cannot put out a near fire. Yes, of course, many of us would go back to Central to take it again, and sometimes I would even go all the way up to Shangwan before I ride on the reverse direction. Well, for the other information, in the second part of the reply, you've been talking about the early bird concessionary fare. But then during the evening rush hours, the situation is also disastrous. So you talk about the early bird situation. So, well, for platform management, yes, it will help, but then it doesn't help much. You can only maintain order. You may be reducing delays But then in terms of increasing capacity is not helping. And some of the platform assistance are also pushed around. And also you talk about your railway policy when it comes to railway development. Well, other forms of other modes of transport will have to be rationalized. In other words, they will have to cut the route, they will have to cut the frequency. But then after the situation becomes worse, they are not able to increase the frequency again. In the reply, you said that you would look at how buses can play a bigger role. So what concrete plans do you have in answering my question about the congestion in Admiralty? So can you tell us more specifically as to what you're going to do to ease the congestion in the Admiralty station? Well, we will have to make the best use of the capacity of the MTR system. That's why we set that up for passenger control on the platform, and the signaling system would also have to be enhanced in order to increase the frequency and so on. Everything that can be done will be done. And also at different time slots as to whether or not we are able to stream the passengers. That's why we are offering this early morning concession. But then I'd like to clarify one thing. The government's policy is not that railway will always get a priority.
We have always said that it would be public transport based, and in fact 90% of passenger trips are using public transport. And in public transport we use railway as a trunk because we want to confirm that as a mass carrier it is more environmentally friendly, it is effective, and it has a big capacity. However, we still maintain a big proportion for franchise buses and GMBs. As for new railway lines that are to be commissioned, and so there should be a rationalization of other modes of transport. Well, objectively, that must be the case. You can imagine with a new railway coming on stream, people who used to be taking buses or GMBs, they might very naturally switch to the railway. And as a franchise bus company, it may have to face a cut of passengers on certain routes, and it has to look at its cost and operation. And therefore, it is unavoidable for adjustments to be made. But when we look at bus services, we would also look at the different modes of transport and their roles in terms of public transport. But what about other measures apart from early bird or morning peak hour concessions? We will try our very best. We'll do as much as possible. Last one in the first round and then two in the second round. I will allow them to speak. Ms. Alice Mack, first round. I'd like to ask about question 107 about Tuen Mun West bypass. At what stage are we now? Why is it that in 2010 you said there would be support, and then you said there were strong views from the public, and now you say you have to look into the issue again? So is the project going to be on time? And then I'd like to refer to 106. Logistics park development on Lantau. I have asked the question in A, B, and C, but then the reply was in a very general manner. Do you have any concept for developing the logistics park? Is it that your reply is too general? You just stated the principle. And then 109. Again, port logistics, particularly at Ching Yi. Whenever you talk about logistics policies, you talk about land use. 10 hectares in Tuen Mun, certain hectares in Ching Yi, and 9-point-something hectares already commissioned, etc. I'd like to know what other policies do you have with regard to logistics. When we talk about port logistics, we should not just look at land, but whether the land can be used by the logistics industry, especially for storage. And container vehicles, they are part of the logistics trade. Would also, the TD also look at whether there is enough space for the parking of container vehicles and also the placing of empty containers? Don't just talk about the zoning of land. As you know, I have been in Kwai Ching for over 20 years. I thank you for allowing me to have a good report card, because every 2 years I have to take the lorry drivers to petition because their STT sites are taken back every 2 years. And you have just no plan to provide space for the parking of container vehicles and also the placing of empty containers. You just give them the land, however, the transportation trade is very much related to logistics. Where should they go? Secretary, with regard to Tuen Mun West bypass, I'll defer to the Highways Department. As for logistics park and Cheng Yi and land for logistics use, etc., I fully understand where Ms. Mack is coming from. In fact, in our planning process, we must look at the transport impact that would come from any policy, including our logistics policy. I'm sure we have to do a better job. As for Lantau and logistics development, well, we have to look at the overall planning for Lantau. As for STTs, if the land is required for other uses and therefore the STT has to be stopped, as you know, this is a result of the competition for land use. Sorry, I have to interrupt you because I don't have a lot of time. Last year, there was an STT that was to be withdrawn because you had to use the land for logistics storage. We are both talking about logistics. However, your bureau will take back the land, and the container truck drivers have to use the land for parking. However, you are talking about the same issue. However, one bureau is driving them away. So is there a lack of coordination amongst you? Well, in fact, you can say that the same bureau or different bureaus will have to meet different needs. And we are now talking about getting land for logistics. And we are not only talking about just the land surface per se. In fact, we can have a multi-story kind of facility so that we can maximize the use of land so that more people can benefit from that site. Director of Highways, thank you. With regard to Tuen Mun West bypass, in 2010, we have already got the DC's support for the alignment. So we have started the impact assessment study and also preliminary design. But when we further communicated with residents, they voiced strong objection because they say the Cheng Tin interchange would affect residents. And also, if there is a viaduct on top of Luen Wen Road, there would be some impact on residents. Therefore, we are trying to improve the alignment. At the same time, we have done a TIA together with TD. In recent years, we have introduced improvement projects, and within 10 years, there will not be any problem with the traffic and transport there. And therefore, we have room to improve the alignment of Tuen Mun West bypass, and we are getting on with it. Thank you. Last two in the second round, and then we'll come to a close. 3 minutes each. One, Dr. Priscilla Leung. Yes, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on what I asked just now, and that is whether we should have an inter-bureau study on ferry services in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong waterfront is now opened up for the public. Can you liberalize your policy so that there will be an inter-bureau policy? Please do not just say no. We have studied into the issue many years, and we have submitted many views to the CS4A. I hope you will really take a serious look. And you should not just rely on fare income to maintain ferry services. I hope you will do this in tandem with the commissioning of the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. Secondly, please again do not say no. Those who have not been housed in PRH but are eligible, can they be given a rental subsidy during their wait? I don't think the second question belongs to this session. You are correct, so please concentrate on the first one. The first one, ferry services. I think I said if it is not the essential and crucial external transport link, and if it is just about tourism, then the relevant bureau will have to play a leading role, and we can complement the work. If it is about tourism and waterfront, then it might be the Tourism Commission and the CED Bureau. Yes, we have expressed our views to the relevant bureaus, but we need a complement from the TD. I can always see the two piers from my window at home. I think ferries are still berthed there. But I don't think tendering has been done ever since the waterfront has been opened up. I hope you will add some new thinking to this. We understand there are small and medium-sized operators who are interested, but you have not come up with this inter-bureau policy or thinking. Can you go back and look into this further? We are quite happy to give you more ideas. Let us put our minds together to see how we can make use of the waterfront and preserving the ferry service. Maybe you should introduce the operators to the secretary, said the chairman. Ms. Emily Lau, second round. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to talk about the provision of transport for the disabled. Head 186. There are some indicators here talking about rehab bus numbers and passengers. I think you have just progressed at a snail's pace. You have 84 in. You have got scheduled routes served by 87 buses instead of 84, and for Dial a Ride services, you have 39 instead of 36 now. And the number of passengers have increased from 340,000 to 350,000 on the scheduled routes, and 430,000 increasing to 440,000 on the Dial a Ride services. But have you gauged the demand? Would this belong to another session? No, I'm talking about the number of buses. This is the TD. Don't take away my time. No, you are talking about social welfare. No. Well, if you can answer from your perspective, please also answer. I can defer it to the TD, but you are correct, Secretary. This is a labor and welfare policy. In fact, the TD also complements, for example, the $2 concession. No. Is it that I am really only asking about the LW Bureau? I think the Commissioner can answer part of the question. Indeed, this is an LW Bureau question. Will you be here in the afternoon? Yes. And also the funding will come from the LW Bureau. So you will have the opportunity in the afternoon. Time is quite sufficient for this session. And we will start again at 2:30 in the afternoon. We'll now take a break. Thank you very much for attending the meeting.